When the queen heard who I was, she rose in shock and called me forward. Eric stood outside the grand palace gates, his heart racing. He was just an ordinary man from Earth, and yet he had been summoned to the heart of the galaxy to stand before the queen of an alien species whose name had echoed throughout the stars. His mind spun with questions. How had this happened? Why was he here? The palace stood tall before him, its architecture unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering spires of silver and gold reached up to the sky, the walls carved with intricate symbols Eric couldn't understand. The air was thick with the hum of alien technology, but the atmosphere was also filled with a strange sense of anticipation. He had no idea how he had ended up in this situation. One minute, he was back home on Earth, living a quiet life. The next, he was aboard an alien ship, heading towards a distant world. The journey had been long, and Eric had spent most of it staring out at the endless stars, wondering what awaited him at his destination. Now, standing before the massive gates, Eric felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had been told very little about his purpose here. The only thing he knew for sure was that this meeting would change everything. The guards, tall and imposing, stepped aside as the gates creaked open. Eric stepped forward, feeling the eyes of the palace's inhabitants on him. They were watching him intently, as if he was a curiosity they had never seen before. He kept his head high, trying to ignore the nervousness gnawing at his stomach. He was led through vast, echoing halls lined with alien artifacts, strange plants, and glowing lights. The palace was alive in a way that Earth's buildings could never be. It felt as though every corner, every surface held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Eric couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of it all, but that sense of awe was quickly overshadowed by the tension that built with every step he took. At last, they reached the grand throne room. The massive doors swung open, revealing the queen. She sat on a throne of shimmering stone, her presence commanding and regal. Her alien features were striking, slender, with sharp angles and eyes that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. She wore a crown of silver that glinted in the light, and her robes flowed like liquid, shifting in color as she moved. The room fell silent as Eric entered. The queen's eyes locked onto him, and for a moment neither of them moved. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, and Eric couldn't help but feel small in her presence. She was an alien, a ruler of worlds, and he was just a human from a forgotten corner of the galaxy. She rose slowly from her throne, her gaze never leaving Eric's. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity until finally she spoke. "Who are you?" Her voice was deep, smooth, and filled with authority. There was no warmth in it, only a cold curiosity. "You do not belong here." Eric opened his mouth to speak, but found himself lost for words. What could he say? He didn't belong here, not by any means. He was just a man who had been pulled into something he didn't understand. I'm just a human," Eric said, his voice sounding small and weak in the vast room. "I don't know why I'm here." The queen studied him carefully, her sharp eyes narrowing as if searching for something. She took a step forward, and Eric instinctively took a step back. Her presence was overwhelming, as though the very air around her was charged with power. Human. The word seemed to hold a weight that Eric didn't fully understand. "You carry the scent of Earth with you, but why now, after all these years?" The question caught him off guard. Earth, why would she mention Earth? Before he could respond, the queen raised a hand, silencing him. "No matter, your presence here is not a coincidence. There is something about you, something ancient. I know of your kind, but not in the way you may think." Eric's confusion only deepened. "What do you mean? What's happening here?" The queen studied him for a long time before responding, her voice softer now, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "There are prophecies, human. Ancient ones that speak of a time when Earth would be reborn, when its children would return, bringing with them the power to either save or destroy us all." Eric's mind raced. Prophecies? Was he the one they had spoken of? He had no idea what the queen was talking about, but he could feel the gravity of her words settling on his shoulders. "What does that mean for me?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. The queen's eyes flashed with something, recognition, maybe, or perhaps fear. "You are the one they spoke of, the one who will decide the fate of the galaxy." Eric's heart skipped a beat. He didn't understand. How could he, an ordinary human, have anything to do with the fate of the galaxy? He was just a man who had stumbled into something far beyond his comprehension. The queen stepped down from her throne, her long robes trailing behind her as she approached Eric. "You are not what you seem, human." The blood of your ancestors carries something powerful, something that has been hidden for eons. And now it calls to you. Eric's mind raced, trying to grasp what was happening. He was just a man, nothing more. But the way the queen spoke, the way she looked at him, there was something more, something deep within him that was awakening, though he had no idea how. "Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The queen's expression softened for a brief moment, a flicker of something almost like sympathy in her eyes. "Because, like your ancestors, you have the power to change everything, and whether you choose to embrace that power or reject it is up to you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and full of meaning. Eric didn't know what to say. He felt as if he were standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an unknown abyss. The future was uncertain, and yet he felt a pull, a strange sense that he was meant for something greater than he had ever imagined. Before he could respond, the queen turned away from him, her robes swirling around her as she walked back to her throne. "You will stay here, human. There is much for you to learn, much for you to understand. The galaxy is not as simple as you think, and your place in it is far more important than you realize." Eric watched her, unsure of what to do next. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. Whatever path he chose, it would lead him into a future far beyond anything he could have imagined. As he turned to leave the throne room, his thoughts were a whirlwind. Earth, the galaxy prophecies, none of it made sense. But deep down he knew that somehow it was all connected. And he was at the center of it. Eric lay on the soft bed, staring up at the ceiling, his mind spinning. The Grand Palace felt so different from the world he had come from. He had never imagined that one day he would be standing in the heart of an alien civilization, surrounded by beings from the stars. His life had always been quiet, working, living, simply existing. But now everything had changed. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. "You are the one they spoke of, the one who will decide the fate of the galaxy." What did she mean by that? He was just a man, no powers, no special abilities, just a human from Earth. How could he possibly have the power to change anything, let alone save or destroy the galaxy? Eric rubbed his forehead, trying to make sense of it all. The room was silent, the only sound the soft hum of the palace's alien technology. He had been brought here for a reason, but the reason remained unclear. Earth, his home, had been forgotten by the galaxy for eons. Why was it suddenly important again? As he lay there, a quiet knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He quickly sat up and called out, "Come in." The door opened, and a tall alien entered. She had smooth, pale skin that shimmered like glass, and her eyes were a deep violet, filled with intelligence and curiosity. She wore a simple but elegant outfit, nothing too fancy, yet it seemed to suit her perfectly. She was a servant, Eric guessed, perhaps one of the Queen's attendants. "Eric, the Queen requests your presence," she said in a calm, melodious voice. Eric stood up, still feeling out of place in this strange world. "Of course," he replied, trying to sound confident. He followed the alien woman through the halls of the palace, the soft clicking of their footsteps echoing in the vast space. His thoughts were still racing, but he had learned quickly that questions were not always answered here. The Queen held the answers, but she didn't always give them easily. When they arrived at the throne room, the Queen was already waiting, sitting on her grand throne, her regal presence filling the room. There was a different air about her today, something in her gaze that felt more intense than before. Eric took a deep breath and stepped forward, trying to steady his nerves. "You came," the Queen said, her voice calm but with an underlying strength. She gestured for him to come closer, her eyes studying him with an intensity that made him uneasy. "There is much you must learn, Eric. The universe is not as simple as you believe. Your ancestors knew that, and so they hid the truth, leaving only fragments behind." Eric looked at her, confusion clouding his thoughts. "My ancestors? What do you mean?" "What truth are you talking about?" The Queen stood and walked toward him, her every step graceful and purposeful. "Long before your time, humans were not just ordinary beings. They were powerful, capable of great things. The first humans who left Earth carried knowledge, knowledge that could change the fate of the galaxy. And your bloodline, Eric, is a key to unlocking that knowledge." Eric felt a chill run down his spine. "My bloodline? But I'm just a man. I don't have any special powers." "I don't know anything about this." The Queen's eyes softened, but only slightly. "You may not know it yet, but it is within you. You are connected to something much older, something that has been hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The power of your ancestors has been passed down, and it is now awakening in you." She paused for a moment, as if measuring his reaction. Do you understand now, Eric? Your presence here is no accident. You have a role to play in the events that are unfolding. Eric's heart raced, and a sense of unease settled in his chest. What had he gotten himself into? His entire life had been ordinary. He had no experience with power or ancient knowledge. And yet here he was, caught up in something far bigger than himself. He didn't know what the Queen wanted from him, but he knew he couldn't back out now. There was no turning back. But what do I have to do? How am I supposed to stop or save anything? He asked, his voice filled with desperation. The Queen turned her gaze to the window, where the stars could be seen twinkling in the distance. You must first understand what has been lost, Eric. You must unlock the secrets of the past before you can change the future. Your ancestors were the protectors of something powerful, something the galaxy feared. But over time they lost their way, and the knowledge was hidden, buried deep within the earth. Eric tried to process what she was saying. So, what exactly am I supposed to do? The Queen's eyes turned back to him, sharp and focused. You must go to Earth. There are places hidden away that contain the knowledge you seek. You will need to find them, but you will not be alone. There are those who will help you and those who will try to stop you. Eric felt a sense of dread wash over him. Earth. It seemed so far away now, a place he could barely remember. What could he possibly find there that would help him save the galaxy? The Queen stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You must understand, Eric. The universe has changed, and not everyone is ready for what's coming. There are factions, ancient enemies, who seek to destroy the legacy of your people. They will stop at nothing to ensure that humanity remains in the shadows. Eric looked at her, his mind spinning. He had no idea what kind of enemies they were talking about, but something told him that the stakes were far higher than he had ever imagined. How do I even begin? Eric asked, his voice uncertain. The Queen placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle for someone so powerful. You begin by trusting yourself. The answers will come, but only when you are ready to receive them. For now, rest. Tomorrow, we will begin your training. You will need to be strong, stronger than you ever thought possible. As Eric left the throne room, the weight of the Queen's words settled heavily on him. There was so much he didn't understand, and even more he feared. But one thing was clear. His life would never be the same again. The journey ahead would be filled with danger, uncertainty, and a mystery that spanned the depths of the galaxy. But it was his journey now, and there was no turning back. Eric woke up early the next morning, the first rays of sunlight creeping through the windows of his room. The night had been restless. His mind wouldn't stop racing with questions, doubts, and confusion. He still couldn't understand how he, an ordinary human from Earth, could play a part in something so much larger than himself. The Queen had spoken of powers and knowledge, of his ancestors, legacy, but none of it made sense to him. How could he possibly be connected to such a history? But there was no time to dwell on it now. Today, the Queen had told him he would begin his training. He wasn't sure what that meant, but he knew he had no choice but to follow through. If there was even a small chance that he could help save the galaxy, he had to take it. He got dressed quickly and walked out of his room. The hallways of the palace were quieter now, the usual hum of activity replaced by a strange, heavy stillness. The air felt different today, like something was about to change. He could feel it in his bones, a tingling anticipation that made his skin prickle. He arrived at the training hall where the Queen was already waiting for him. She was dressed in simple robes today, her regal crown absent. It made her seem less imposing, but no less powerful. She stood with her back to him, gazing out at the view of the city below. When she heard him approach, she turned slowly, her sharp eyes locking onto his. Are you ready? She asked, her voice calm but with an edge of authority. Eric nodded, though he wasn't sure what he was getting into. I guess so. The Queen gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Good, today you will begin to understand what is required of you. This is not an easy task. The knowledge you seek is buried deep within you, and it will take time to awaken it. Eric felt his heart race again. He had no idea what she meant by that, but he didn't ask. He had learned that asking too many questions wasn't always helpful here. The Queen's lessons were often indirect, and he had to learn to read between the lines. Follow me, the Queen said, and turned toward a door at the far side of the hall. Eric followed her, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The hallway they entered led down a narrow corridor, the walls adorned with strange symbols and artifacts that Eric couldn't begin to understand. It felt like they were going deeper into the heart of the palace, further away from everything he knew. They stopped in front of a large door made of dark, polished stone. The queen placed her hand on it, and the door slowly creaked open, revealing a vast chamber inside. The walls were lined with shelves filled with books, scrolls, and strange devices that hummed with an energy Eric couldn't quite place. In the center of the room stood a large, round table, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move on their own. "This is the Library of Knowledge," the queen said, stepping inside. "Here you will find everything you need to understand your legacy and the power that lies dormant within you. It is not just information you will seek, but the connection to your ancestors that has been severed for so long." Eric stepped inside cautiously, feeling a mix of awe and uncertainty. The room was vast, and the sheer amount of information it contained overwhelmed him. He had never been much of a scholar, never cared for books or ancient texts, but now it seemed like everything he needed to learn was here. "How do I even begin?" Eric asked, glancing around the room. The queen turned to him, her gaze thoughtful. "Start with the basics. You must learn about your own history first, understand who you are before you can understand your place in the galaxy. The knowledge you seek is not just in the books, but in your blood. That is why your training begins here." She gestured toward the table, and a holographic image flickered to life above it. The image showed a star map of the galaxy, with Earth placed at the far edge, a tiny, almost insignificant dot compared to the vastness around it. Eric's heart sank as he saw it. Earth, his home, was nothing more than a forgotten speck in the grand scheme of things. But then, the map zoomed in, focusing on a series of coordinates near Earth. The queen tapped a button on the side of the table, and the image shifted. "This," the queen said, her voice steady, "is where the knowledge is hidden. There are ancient sites on Earth, places that were built by your ancestors long before humanity even dreamed of space travel. These sites contain the secrets you need, the power you need." Eric leaned closer to the table, his eyes narrowing. "But how do I get there? How do I find these places?" The queen looked at him, her eyes unwavering. "That is the second part of your training. You will need to learn to unlock the potential within you. The knowledge will come when you are ready, but it will not be easy. You must prove yourself worthy of it." Eric nodded slowly, though he had no idea what that really meant. "And what happens when I find these places? What am I supposed to do with the knowledge?" "That," the queen said, "will depend on you. The power that lies within your blood is not a tool to be wielded carelessly. You must decide how it is used, whether it will be a force for peace or destruction. That is the weight of your role." Eric felt the heaviness of her words settle over him. He wasn't sure what kind of power the queen was talking about, but he knew he wasn't ready for it. He was just a man, a regular human from Earth. What could he possibly do with such power? The queen's gaze softened, though it was only a small change. "You have been chosen for a reason, Eric. You are not here by chance. The galaxy has waited for you, and now it is time for you to step into your destiny." Eric swallowed hard. The queen was right. He hadn't chosen this path. It had been thrust upon him, but now it was his responsibility to see it through. "How do I start?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. The queen turned toward the shelves, pulling down a thin, ancient-looking book. She handed it to Eric, and he took it hesitantly. The cover was made of a strange material he couldn't identify, and the pages felt old and fragile. As he opened the book, symbols began to shift on the pages, as though they were alive. Eric stared at them, his mind struggling to make sense of what he was seeing. "This book will help you understand the first step of your journey," the queen said. "Study it carefully. It contains the key to unlocking the knowledge hidden within you." Eric nodded, though he wasn't sure what to expect. He had never been a great student, and this was far beyond anything he had ever learned. But he had no choice. He had to try. The queen gave him a final look before turning to leave the room. "You will be tested, Eric. But you are not alone. Remember that." Eric watched her go, then turned back to the book in his hands. The symbols on the pages began to glow faintly, and as he focused on them, a strange warmth spread through his chest. It was as though something deep inside him was awakening. Eric had spent the past few days in the library, poring over the ancient book the queen had given him. The symbols on the pages seemed to speak to him in ways he couldn't understand. Yet every time he focused on them, a strange warmth spread through his chest, as if something deep inside him was beginning to stir. He couldn't explain it, but it was as if the book was calling to him, urging him to unlock its secrets. It had been difficult at first. The symbols didn't make sense. The ancient language was unlike anything he had ever seen. He had read through the pages over and over, trying to decipher even a small part of it. But the more he studied, the more he realized that the knowledge wasn't just in the words. It was in him, waiting to be uncovered. On the fourth day, as he sat in front of the book once again, something happened. His fingers brushed over one of the symbols, and for the first time, the letters seemed to shift before his eyes. They rearranged themselves into a pattern he could understand, and then, just as suddenly, they faded back into their original form. Eric blinked, unsure if what he had just seen was real. He sat back in his chair, his heart pounding in his chest. Could it be? Could he have just unlocked something? He turned the pages quickly, searching for another clue, and there it was. Another symbol glowing faintly on the page. As he touched it, the words began to form in his mind, clear and unmistakable. The book was teaching him, guiding him toward something greater. As he read, the words seemed to make sense now. They spoke of a time long before Earth had become what it was. The first humans were not simple beings. They were explorers, travelers of the stars, with knowledge that spanned the galaxy. They had unlocked powers that allowed them to shape the fabric of reality itself, bending the laws of nature to their will. But, as with all great powers, it had come with a price. The first humans had been betrayed by their own, and in the aftermath of that betrayal, their knowledge had been hidden, scattered across the stars, and forgotten by all but a few. The Queen had spoken of this, the knowledge buried deep within the earth, waiting to be found. Eric now understood what she meant. He felt a surge of excitement and fear. He was no longer just a man. He was part of something far larger than he had ever imagined. His bloodline, his ancestors, had been a key to this knowledge, and now it was up to him to unlock it. But there was something else. The book spoke of a darkness, a force that had been hidden for eons, a force that sought to destroy the legacy of the first humans. Eric's chest tightened as he read. It was not just about finding the knowledge, it was about protecting it. There were those who would do anything to keep the secrets hidden, to prevent humanity from regaining its lost power. The book fell silent for a moment, its pages still. Eric sat back, trying to absorb everything he had just read. It was overwhelming. He wasn't ready for this. He had never been prepared for something like this. The door to the library opened, and the Queen stepped inside. She looked at him with her usual steady gaze, as though she had been waiting for him to reach this point. "I see you've made progress," she said, her voice calm, yet carrying an undeniable weight. Eric nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His thoughts were racing too fast. "I think I understand now," he said finally, his voice low. "The knowledge, the power, it's in me. It's all connected to my ancestors." The Queen's eyes softened slightly, though her expression remained serious. "Yes, Eric, you have begun to awaken that connection, but there is still much for you to learn. You have only scratched the surface." Eric looked at her, his confusion growing. "But what's next? How do I stop the darkness? How do I find what I need?" The Queen stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "The next step in your training is to learn to harness the power within you. The knowledge is already inside you, but you must learn how to use it. It will not come easily, and there are risks. But if you are to protect humanity and the galaxy, you must master it." Eric swallowed hard. "How do I begin?" The Queen's lips curled into a faint smile. "You will begin with what the book has revealed to you. But you must also trust in yourself, Eric. The power lies not in the knowledge alone, but in your ability to control it. You must learn to connect with the energy around you, feel its presence, and harness it to your will." She turned and gestured for him to follow. "Come with me. It's time for you to take the next step." Eric stood, his legs feeling weak beneath him. He followed the Queen out of the library, the weight of her words heavy on his mind. He had so many questions, but he knew better than to ask. She would teach him in her own time, and he had to trust that process. They walked through the palace, moving toward an area that Eric had not seen before. The hallways grew darker as they descended, the air cooler. Finally, they came to a small, dimly lit chamber. In the center of the room was a stone altar, surrounded by intricate carvings and strange symbols. "This is where you will begin," the Queen said, her voice quiet now. "Here you will learn to focus your energy. This is not about brute strength. It is about understanding the forces that bind the universe together." Eric looked at the altar, unsure of what he was supposed to do. The room felt charged, as though something powerful was waiting to be unlocked. The Queen motioned for him to approach. "Place your hands on the stone," she instructed. Close your eyes and clear your mind. Focus on the energy that surrounds you. Feel it. You will know when you are ready. Eric hesitated for a moment, but then stepped forward. He placed his hands on the stone, feeling its cold surface. His heart raced as he closed his eyes, trying to calm his thoughts. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew that this was the moment. The moment when everything could change. At first, nothing happened. He felt nothing but the coolness of the stone beneath his hands. But then, slowly, he began to feel a faint pulse, a warmth that seemed to come from deep within the stone. It spread through his fingers, up his arms, and into his chest. It was subtle at first, almost like a whisper in the back of his mind, but it grew stronger. The pulse became a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, filling the room with energy. Eric focused on it, trying to understand it. He could feel it moving within him, like a river of power flowing through his veins. It was familiar, yet foreign, like a part of him that he had forgotten. The symbols on the altar began to glow faintly, their lines shifting and twisting as though they were alive. The air around Eric crackled with energy, and he felt a sudden surge of power. It was overwhelming, yet exhilarating. He opened his eyes, and the room seemed different now. The energy was still there, surrounding him, filling him. He could feel it, sense it in everything around him. The queen was watching him intently, but he didn't look at her. He was too focused on what was happening inside him. For the first time, Eric felt a connection to something greater than himself. It was as if the entire universe was within his reach. The power that had been hidden for so long was now a part of him, and he could feel it calling to him. The queen spoke softly, but her words cut through the haze of his thoughts. "You are ready to begin, Eric. The path ahead is still long, but you have taken the first step. Trust in yourself and in the power within you." Eric nodded, still feeling the pulse of energy within him. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time he felt ready to face it. He had been chosen for a reason, and he would not fail. The galaxy's fate, and humanity's, was now in his hands. Eric stood at the edge of the training ground, the wind gently brushing against his face. The palace was quiet today, the usual hum of activity replaced by a strange, heavy silence that seemed to follow him everywhere. His hands were clenched into fists, and he could still feel the energy pulsing within him, even though he had learned to control it better over the past few days. But there was something different about today. It was as if the calm before a storm was settling in. The queen had told him that the next step in his journey was about to begin. She had guided him through the training, helped him tap into the power hidden within him, and now it was time for him to take the final step, to prove that he was ready for the task ahead. He didn't feel ready. He still had so many questions, so many doubts, but there was no turning back. The knowledge of his ancestors, the power of his bloodline, it was all real. It was inside him, waiting to be unlocked. And now the time had come for him to step into his true role. The queen appeared beside him, her presence as commanding as always. She had been his guide, his teacher, but now she was something more. She was a reminder of the responsibility that lay ahead. The galaxy's fate rested on his shoulders, and he had to learn to carry that weight. "It's time," the queen said, her voice calm but filled with an underlying urgency. Eric nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had trained for this moment, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure he was ready. "What do I have to do?" The queen's eyes studied him carefully. "You have learned to harness the energy within you. You have felt the power of your ancestors, but there is still one final test. You must go to Earth, to the hidden sites, and find what has been lost. Only then will you understand your true purpose." Eric swallowed hard, the thought of returning to Earth filling him with a strange sense of dread. Earth had always been his home, but it now felt like a distant memory, a place he had left behind long ago. The thought of stepping back onto its soil, into the unknown, made his stomach twist. But the queen was right. The knowledge he needed, the power he sought, was there. It had been buried, hidden from the rest of the galaxy for centuries, and it was his job to find it. He couldn't back down now. He had come too far. "I'm ready," he said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. The queen nodded, her expression unreadable. "The journey will not be easy. There are those who will try to stop you, those who seek to keep the truth hidden. You must be prepared for what lies ahead." Eric's mind raced. "Who are these people? What do they want with Earth?" The queen's gaze hardened, her voice growing cold. "There are factions, ancient enemies who fear the power of your ancestors. They have been watching you, waiting for you to make your move. They will do everything in their power to stop you from reclaiming what has been lost." Eric felt a chill run down his spine. These enemies were not just threats to him, they were threats to everything. If they succeeded, if they managed to keep the knowledge hidden, it would mean the end of humanity's legacy. "How do I stop them?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear building inside him. The Queen's eyes softened slightly. "You will not fight them with force, Eric. You will need to outsmart them to uncover the truth before they do. The power of your bloodline is not just in strength, it is in your ability to understand, to connect with the forces around you. Trust in that and you will succeed." Eric nodded slowly, absorbing her words. The Queen was right. Strength alone would not win this battle. He had to be clever, strategic. He had to outthink his enemies, just as his ancestors had done before him. "Then I'll go," Eric said, determination settling in his chest. "I'll find the knowledge and I'll stop them." The Queen's expression softened for a moment, a rare sign of approval. "I believe in you, Eric. You have the strength, the power, and the heart to do this. But remember, you are not alone. You will have allies along the way." Eric took a deep breath, his mind already racing ahead to the journey that awaited him. The path to Earth was long, and the challenges would be great, but he couldn't afford to hesitate. The galaxy's future depended on him. The Queen stepped back, signaling that the moment had come. "Go now. Your journey begins today. The stars await you." With a final glance at the Queen, Eric turned and walked toward the ship that would take him back to Earth. He felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The unknown lay ahead, but for the first time he felt ready to face it. He had trained, he had learned, and now it was his turn to step into the legacy of his ancestors. The journey was not going to be easy. There would be dangers, enemies, and obstacles to overcome. But Eric knew one thing for certain: he would not fail. He couldn't afford to. The fate of humanity, of the entire galaxy, rested on his shoulders, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. As the ship lifted off from the palace, Eric looked out of the window, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. Earth, his home, was waiting for him. He didn't know what he would find when he arrived, but he was ready to face it. The path ahead was unclear, but with every step, he would uncover the secrets that had been hidden for so long. And with that knowledge, he would fulfill his destiny.